Corner, we like to visit with some of the folks who helped make Comet hockey history. And the gentleman who's my special guest tonight was one of the original folks who helped make Comet hockey history, the great sport it is here today, George Drysdale. And George, we've spent a lot of time ringside and microphones together over the past. It's been a long time since we've had a chance to talk, and welcome back to Comet Corner.
Thank you, Bob. It's nice to be back.
You, of course, have many memories of the original Comet team because when you came here, Eddie Long was the little kid that everybody was kind of helping take care of. He was the junior member of that organization, and you were one of the dads of the group, weren't you?
Yeah, Eddie was a little 17-year-old when he came here, and he stayed with Roe and I for a few months when we first came down, and of course the Buchanan boys were here then, and he finally decided to move in with them, which was fine for all of us.
And for those of you who weren't aware that the Buchanan boys were twins, Mike and Neil, and they were a couple of the roughhouse kids I ever saw in my life, even among themselves, weren't they?
Yeah, they used to do some scrapping during the practices.
Yeah, that's brother against brother.
Absolutely.
Just exactly what was it like to come here? And the city at that point was pretty foreign to hockey. They hadn't seen much of it. How did they react?
Well, Bob, one of the great things that Ernie Berg and Van Orman did, they opened up the Coliseum when we first got here and let everyone in for free, which I thought was a great idea on their part to introduce the people to hockey, and I think that was one of the main reasons it was so successful. And of course, Ernie and Harold, I just thought they were great people, and they treated us very well.
That's right. At that time, Mr. Fred Huber was the commissioner of the I.H.L, and of course the Huber Trophy named after him for the league championship. And Fred is still alive. He's a legend in the world of hockey, and at this point in time, he came down, I believe, and handled. Did he handle the clinics, the hockey?
Yes,
clinics?
he sure did. Ernie was on the PA, and of course, Fred came down and took care of the rest of it for us. But he got it introduced here, and he did. Of course, his mind was something I couldn't believe. He was something else. Yes, he sure was.
One of the things that has changed so drastically of all the things that have happened in hockey is the equipment. I can remember myself years and years ago, all the jerseys that you see today used to be made out of pure wool.
Yes.
And boy, when they got wet, they got heavy.
Well, it was just like wearing a winter overcoat. You know, and your skates were leather, and after the first period, I think they must have weighed about 15 pounds, if not more.
Not to mention the fact, your shoulder pads were leather, your gloves were leather, your shin pads.
It was just unbelievable. You know, they said, we'd tell people, well, how much do you lose in a game? Well, 15 or 20 pounds. They say, oh, you're crazy.
Really? That's right, you actually did.
You actually did.
And a lot of it went right into your equipment, no doubt about it.
That's right.
And those were the days when sticks had no curves, there was no plastic of any kind.
No.
The only thing that hasn't changed is the puck, I guess, George.
No, that never changes, and I got a few of those in the old Zonker a few times.
But it was a great experience here. I know I came a year later, and the lore of the game was here at that point. And through the years that have gone beyond that, the many, many friends that I made in the game. And I think it's incredible to think how many of the players who came here have stayed here.
Oh, Bob, we must have, I think the last count, I think we have 43 old-timers that are staying here. And, of course, you know, they come down from Canada, and this is just a nice city. And the fellows seem to enjoy it, and every one of them have been remarkably successful in their different jobs. And, of course, I was traveling out here tonight, and I could tell that I've been retired for 2 or 3 years because I couldn't believe the traffic when I was coming out here at 5 o'clock. I thought, geez, I'm not going to get to see Chase in time.
Well, you made it in time, and there was little to worry about at that particular level. But looking at the game as it's gone, and the things that have happened to it, and there have been so many highs and so many lows. Your hockey, of course, began in Canada, and when you got started as a youngster, I'm sure you never knew that Fort Wayne existed until this opportunity opened up.
No, as a matter of fact, I did get started in Canada with the Toronto Marlboros organization, and of course, from there I went to Stratford Crailers and played my junior hockey there. And while I was in Stratford, I got picked up by the New York Rangers, and I went to their training camp, and they wanted to send me to a team that was called New York Rovers in those days, and I was rooming with one of the old-time Ranger players at that time out in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and he said, "I don't think you want to do that." So I said, "Well, that's good enough for me." But Mr. Boucher, Frank Boucher, was a real gentleman. He was very kind to me. And Red Stableford come over from Europe, and he said, "I'd like to have you there." So I spent the next 3 years in Europe.
That, I guess, was one of the real great experiences of its time when hockey was filling places like Wembley and other areas. English hockey was incredible.
Oh, English hockey at that period, Bob. Earl Scordarino, Wembley, Streatham, Haringey, down in Brighton on the south coast, Nottingham up in north in the Midlands. It was just a wonderful thing, and one of the greatest things for me in my hockey, I got to meet the pilots that were in the Battle of Britain.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, they invited me over, and I couldn't believe that they were inviting me over to the Royal Air Force base in Croydon, and it was a tremendous thrill. I got to meet these guys, and of course Kenny's about my age. He could probably back me up on this, but when we were kids, that they were our heroes. Were the pilots of the Battle of Britain.
That's right. Yeah. They were everybody's heroes.
Yes, they were.
About that.
Right.
I think if there was one thing that has been a misconception about the International Hockey League, maybe in many years past, probably because it was a renegade league of sorts, was the talent that played here. And I think the talent that played in this league was as good as talent that played in the American League, and sometimes better. It was an incredible league, but it got a bad rap way back when.
Well, I don't know why it got a bad rap, Bob, but you're right. There was an awful lot of good hockey players come through here, and back in those days, there wasn't that many. There were only 6 teams in the National Hockey League, 6 in the American, 6 in the Western Canada League, and 5 or 6 in this league. Hey, if you didn't make one of those clubs, you got the old lunch pail out, went back home, and got up at 5 below zero every morning. You didn't want that.
But those were the same days when senior amateur hockey in Canada was an incredibly strong situation as well, both East and West in Canada.
That's right. That's right. I tell some of the fellows a story about I came to Fort Wayne for $20 a week difference, and it's hard to believe because Jack Stewart and I. He was in Chatham, and between my job and what I was making in Chatham, the difference was $20. And he said, "I can't pay you." And I said, "Well, Fort Wayne's coming through. They're breaking camp from Woodstock, Ontario.
Oh, yeah.
And they're coming through Chatham. And Alex is going to pick me up the next morning." And he called my apartment the next day, and my wife Rose said, "He's on his way to Fort Wayne for $20 difference." Can you imagine?
Of course, $20 was a pretty good lump.
Well,
in those
yeah,
days,
you could buy 3 or 4 bags of groceries.
I guess you could.
Yeah,
There's little doubt about it.
Yeah.
But in those days, when you reflect on 1952, 3, 4, and 5, approximately what was the weekly pay that you got playing for the Komets?
Oh, Bob, probably, between my job and what I was making in there, it came out to $150, and the reason I came, I didn't have to work.
There you go. See, that's exactly the way it was.
It went anywhere from, say, $90 to $150.
And that was good money for a minor league athlete in those days.
Yeah, and our lunch money was $2.50 a day. That's right. Our eating money.
And you could get 3 meals on it.
Well, there was an awful lot of grilled cheese sandwiches ordered.
You've had a great life here in the city. I'm sure you wouldn't trade it for anything.
No, Bob. Canada is a great country, but there's nothing like United States.
Well, I can appreciate that because the day that George got his citizenship, I was proud to stand up for him.
That's right. You were. I remember that.
And it's just been a great life. We've had some great times. George and I used to do the games together, and I think one of the craziest stories I'll ever be able to tell, and I'm going to tell it because George is here tonight. It was the night of the record-breaking overtime hockey game in 1960 against St. Paul.
Right.
And we'll just share some trade secrets. In those days, I was the only person that ever used the press box, and they used to try to kick us out all the time.
That's right.
But we demanded we get up there. We didn't want to sit in the crowd.
Yeah.
And I carried a briefcase and usually would take a little libation up there, and it was only George and I that knew it and enjoyed it. And we would. But all of a sudden this night, the overtime in the Turner Cup playoff had gone to midnight, and I said to George, you know, right now I think I'm about out of bud. Do you think you could go down to the press room and find us one?
Right.
So George went to the press room and didn't find one, but what did you find?
Well, I found a fellow out in the hallway, and I had bought us a bottle of 7-Up or Coke, I forget which. And I took
7-Up,
and I said, he said, would you like something to go with this? And I said, well, sure. So I took another little sip of this, and of course I got it right down, and he filled it up with, you know, a little bit of the
a wee
drop of the crater.
He did.
And so I said, Bob, I said, I couldn't find anything in the building. I said, this is the only thing. I know you're parched, so I said, this is all I've got. And just then there was a red light on there, and the red light would come on for you to go back on the air.
Right.
Well, just as the red light come on, I handed this to Bob, and Bob took a great big horn out of that, and he didn't speak for about 20 seconds.
It was impossible because the friend he'd met downstairs was an old racer by the name of Jimmy Stovall.
Yeah.
And Stovall, who knew me, filled it very, very full of the high spirits.
Right.
And I'm expecting only a nice soft drink to slide down my throat, and it was about 2 gulps down, and I could not speak for 20 seconds.
That's
Tears rolled out of my eyes. But we made it till 1:20 in the morning, didn't we?
Did we ever? Boy, that was an evening to remember.
Lots of memories. George, we appreciate the fact that you stopped by tonight, and we appreciate, I think, as citizens of Fort Wayne, to know that you and Roe and so many other of the great players of the past have made Fort Wayne their home city.
Yeah, that's for sure, Bob. I really appreciate you having me out.
Well, I know you still enjoy you rarely miss a hockey game.
I very rarely miss it. I pretty well have a pretty good idea what's going on, who's going and who isn't going, and the team is playing real well. If they keep playing like they played those 2 games against Atlanta, I don't think anybody's going to touch them. I really don't.
Yeah.
And these two kids in the net the other night, this Goche and Gilmore.
Yeah.
I mean, for that kid to step in, Gilmore, so what? He had a little bit of a bad start, but this other kid come in, and it was just unbelievable the way he played. So I don't think the guys got anything to worry about.
No,
and then I got to meet all these young guys, and it's really a thrill. And Bruce here.
Yeah, so. George had a chance to practice his Russian a little bit tonight with Igor and Vladdy.
All these guys, so
George, thanks for coming by, and stick around and grab some of the good food. I know Vladdy is going to have some